guys, welcome. We are actually live streaming. We made it work this time, which is really exciting. We haven't been able to in the past, and super excited today. This is actually the 250th episode of Promote, Profit, Publish, and I'm super excited. For those of you who were on earlier, I never would have envisioned that I started this podcast in 2018 and would get this many in. So super excited, celebration. For those of you who missed it, this will be on as a podcast, I believe on the 23rd of the month. So you can go back and check it out then. So welcome everybody. I'm going to be letting people in while we're all talking. I'm super excited today to have Tracy Hazzard on. Tracy is a seasoned media expert with over 2,600 interviews from articles in Authority Magazine, BuzzFeed, and her Inc. magazine column. And from her multiple top-ranked videocasts and podcasts like the Binge Factor and Feed Your Brand. One of the CIO's top 26 entrepreneurial podcast. Tracy brings diverse views from what works and what doesn't work in marketing, branding, and media from thought leaders and industry icons, redefining success around the globe. Her unique gift is to podcasting, marketing, and branding world is being able to identify the unique bingeable factor, the thing that makes people come back again and again and again, actively listen and sharing you as a raving fan base. And obviously I can't read this morning, so I apologize. that should be like a Monday morning read, not a Friday morning read. So Tracy, welcome. I'm super excited to have her because we had a big AI call last month. Tracy put it together, and it was just really interesting to hear people from diverse entrepreneurial areas come together to talk about how they used AI. And there were a couple things that Tracy shared about her own company. They've been using it for years. So she's my go-to person to pick brains about, oh, that sounds too technical. Thank you for sharing, because I'm not a tech person. So I'm really excited to have you here today. So tell us what you're going to talk about, Tracy.
Well, AI is the talk of the town. However, the reality is that it's a lot of talk. And is it in use a lot? Let's talk about some of that today. And let's talk about ways at which it's disrupting industries, because it is going to. I have an entire team of copywriters, graphic designers, video editors, audio editors. I have over 80 staff members around the world, and they are going to get their jobs disrupted, whether they like it or not. Like, it doesn't really matter whether they embrace AI. They're going to be out of a job if they don't understand how it's going to impact their job and either embrace it as a part of the process, train on it, learn on it. There's one of my favorite movies, and this is, we watch it all the time, but it's called Hidden Figures. It's about space. Tom and I are kind of space geeks. It's about the women who were called the computers, right? That's what they were called. The Black women who were called the computers back in NASA days. And they basically did all the calculations, all the mathematical calculations. And this giant IBM machine shows up in the building one day. And the manager of the department looks at it and says, uh-oh, we're going to be in trouble. And she teaches them all Fortran. She teaches them all code. Not just mathematical calculations, but she teach them how to code, because she says that beast in there is going to need a bunch of coders and they're not going to know what to do with it. And sure enough, not only did she get all the Black women jobs, but she got all the white women jobs too. So she absolutely did her thing there by transitioning the company. And that's what I keep saying to my staff. I say, I want you to be a part of the solution. How are we going to use it? What is our job going to look like? What's the standard operating procedure going to change to with AI in the process? How can we make it our own? And how can we do something with it so that you're a part of that future, so your job is guaranteed? And hopefully your job is less boring, right? More interesting and exciting. So I don't think we're going to get rid of proofreaders. That's my number one example here. People think that they can have AI proofread it. But the problem is that the large language model that it's trained on has just as bad a spelling as the rest of the world. So it's not going to be any better at proofreading. It doesn't understand whether or not that's right or wrong unless it's truly been trained on the proper dictionaries and all of those things. And its rules are taught to hold fast to that first and foremost, which means that it will get rid of the vernacular very quickly. And so now you'll lose tone. So you might trade off spelling for tone. So these are the things that are a struggle in an industry that's going to have to figure it out before we can trust that proofreading can happen in any format, in any article, in anything we do. So that's an interesting kind of thought, right? Just thinking about it from that perspective.
Yeah, Tracy, that's where the Bill O'Reilly analogy came in. He was on his podcast yesterday and actually said that they said, go write. They gave the ChatGPT some facts and said, go write a Bill O'Reilly style blog about this. And it had all the facts, it had all the figures, but it didn't sound like it came from Bill O'Reilly. There was no humor. There was no sarcasm. There was no, like, all of that was missing, which is an important part of what his audience loves about him is his tone.
Well, that's actually Bill's fault. And I'm going to explain why. Because Bill is a primary TV person and the large language model is on the written word. So unless he has more articles than he has video, the large language model can't learn his tone, can't learn his style. He's not known actually by the computer. And that's the difference right there. So you mentioned I have over 2,600 articles and interviews that I've done. And in those 26 interviews, every single one is a blog that is over, 3,000 words. So for an AI to learn my tone is a lot easier because of the model of how I've developed it. It just fits in their system better. So that's what we have to do better. If we wanted to learn us, if we wanted to be customized to our brand, we wanted to get our voice, we have to give it the data that it requires in the format that it requires. Because the large language models that it's trained on were Twitter, were Reddit. I don't know that I want anything I write to sound like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
140 characters.
Right. I don't want any of that. But it was also trained on broadcast media, but not video. It was trained on audio transcripts and it was trained. So radio transcripts, if you want to think about it, because it's really old school because they used old data. And it was trained on anything that was written down. So from the newspapers, magazines, but anything that got eventually transferred into a database of information. So that's what it was completely trained on. That's predominantly white male. Right there, now Bill O'Reilly's lucky, it probably would get him better than it would get me. But luckily I have enough. And so what enough is the real problem here. We think, oh, okay, well, I'll give it a few chapters of my book and it'll get my tone. That's actually not enough. So we think we found the tipping point is about 50 articles over 3,000 characters. So somewhere around 100,000 words, if you want to think about 100,000 characters, rather, if you want to think about that. So that's about, I'd say that's somewhere around 50,000 words.
Wow, that's incredible. The other
book is doable, right? Christy, I see your brains calculating it. If you put an entire book in it, it can learn it, right? That's enough for it to learn you. So if you had one book and you're writing your next one and you want it to get the same tone, it would get it. So it's enough, but you have to feed it that information in the beginning. You have to teach it to learn from.
Right. Now, I know a lot of people are using it for research, and you said something so interesting to me the last time we talked about you have to be careful with research because ChatGPT stopped it December 21st or 2021. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, because I think people go over and I know students are trying to use it to cheat on their papers and stuff like that, but they don't realize that they stopped it then. Do you know why?
Yeah, they did it as guardrails because if we didn't want to mess in, you don't want to mess in elections. You don't want to mess in current politics. You don't want to mess in something that's a current event that's unfolding and you don't necessarily know how the case resolved itself in court if you're talking about legal findings, right? So they stopped it at a point at which they could say, we have all this history that you can pull from. So it was just a guardrail because remember, ChatGPT was not meant to actually be utilized for your end purpose. It was meant to be tested, brute force tested by the general public. So they just needed to see what people would ask it, so they could decide what format to turn it into something. And so what resulting businesses models were they going to use from it? That's its purpose. People think, oh, it is an end thing in itself, but it's really not. It was the next phase of research, if you want to think it that way, from themselves. So they just put some guardrails on it so that people wouldn't get distracted by what was going on, but also so that it would do a little bit less harm if things weren't resolved in what was going on. And so that's why it's there. But the reality is lucky for most students, their textbooks are older than 2021, so they'll probably just fine.
That's true. I never thought about that. They actually are. There are a lot of old stuff out there. So let's talk a little bit about how writers, authors, book developers can use this, because I know through my testing, it's great for marketing. It can write some incredible copy if you let it.
Well, think about why that is. When I was talking about the large language model that it's trained on, most of the stuff we see in the written word that's out there on the internet for it to train from is marketing and promotion in some way, shape, or form. And so that's also a key to what's happening there. Another side of that is behind the scenes, that the Whisper.ai, which is its transcription model that it utilizes, so how it transcribes things and how it interprets the next word that's going to be said. It also had Microsoft in the process there. So Microsoft was a large investor in that, but they also contributed in kind, their machines, their know-how, their information. And there was always a transcription system within Microsoft Word. So I don't have actual fact on it, but I suspect that they fed it its model of information that came through that transcription as well. And so it has, so legal language, it's a little more accustomed to marketing language because we write emails all the time, right? So if you think about that, it learned from those things as well. Because how many people in the business world would have used that to dictate their email that they were going to have written? So there's a lot of information on that. That's why it's better at writing those than it is at, let's say, writing a chapter. And so that's really where it can be very, very useful in doing this. So I just did this the other day because I joked about it, and I thought, okay, if I joke about it, then I really should do it. But my daughter joined the pep squad at the high school she's going to go to next year. And I decided to join the financial management team because for some reason, the pep squad's the only athletic group that gets no funding from the district. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it so that us parents have to do less work to fundraise for them. And so anyway, you know me enough, Juliet, to know that will actually happen in the next 4 years, whether they like it or not. So they should just cave now. But I figured, okay, well, they were writing this email and they weren't getting the parents to make their donation fast enough so that they could determine, can the girls go to camp this summer? And I was like, okay, well, here's the email that they've been sending. ChatGPT, what do you think? And how can we make it more urgent? How can we make them donate faster? And sure enough, it came with a headline adjustment. The rest of it wasn't so bad, made some minor changes, but the headline adjustment. And we just sent it out this morning, and I was already reporting that donations were already flowing in today. So it must be working, and that's a good thing. But that's because it has the data to give you the results you want. And that's what we need to be really clear about. Sometimes it doesn't have the data we want. So we get these results and we look at it and we think, okay, that must be all there is. Well, that's not true. We all know that. And you just need to really sit back and think about that and saying, okay, that's not what I want. How can I get it what I want? Can I feed it some things to help me get better at what I want? Can I direct it in a better way? And most people just don't have the patience for that kind of level of repeated requests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now we all know that Tracy doesn't like to go door to door selling candy bars because let's face it, our children never do it. We have to.
Right. I call it the non-fundraiser fundraiser. Like if they send me that, I'm going to write a check. So it's not really there's no fundraising and fun in that. No, it's just, I'm going to write a check and be done with this. Don't give me the candy bars.
Absolutely. So let's move on to books, because I think this is where you and I had the biggest conversation about this. You guys, I mentioned at the beginning, Tracy did an AI call last month with a bunch of entrepreneurs from different industries. And one of the guys on there, I don't even know what those people do. I'm sorry, Tracy, I don't remember, but he mentioned that he wrote this amazing book with AI, and he was selling it for $38. So I went over to PayPal and bought it, as did the other publisher who was on the call, because we really wanted to get a flavor for this amazing book. And I didn't get my copy, but the other publisher shared with me that it was not so amazing. We still need book developers, because you can get all of that writing done, but it has not only no voice, but it's almost, from what the other publisher told me, robotic in a sense. Like, it's not engaging. So can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm sure we've got 2 book developers on right now. I'm sure they're probably like, thank you, ChatGPT. I'm still in business.
So there are very few full books in the model of it. But if you go on Amazon, as of last month, there was about 200 books co-written. At least it's stated as co-written by ChatGPT. Evidently, that's an author category now. There are a few issues with that. One is that you can't just give it an outline and ask it to write that when it has no sense of what you want. So if this is supposed to be your ghostwritten book, then it needs to understand your perspective. Now, I'm really lucky. Honestly, my ghostwriter has been using AI for a really long time, because Jasper AI has been around for a while. And so sometimes I'll have articles, but the articles come from my podcast, from my voice, from my perspective on something. So it's already starting from the right place. That's what a lot of these are missing. It says, write me a book about this. Well, that's no better than using some kind of, Romanian farm to write your articles for your publications, for your online publications. And I can tell you that I know companies that built entire websites off of Romanian writing farms, that all they did was write articles that sounded like everything else on the internet. Now, this was pre-AI, so somebody was actually writing it, but all they were doing is basically skirting plagiarism. They were just basically finding out how many other articles in this particular topic and keywords are out there, and then taking just enough from it and changing just enough to make sure that it wouldn't be flagged by Google as plagiarism, because we don't want something that downgrades the website at the end of the day. That would be dangerous for them. So that's what they were doing already. So it already has a model. If a human can do it, the bot can do it faster, right? Like, there's no question about that. That's what these books are like when you do them in this way. Now, I think there's a really great way to be using it to come up with better titles, come up with a better chapter flow. There's ways to feed things into it to help you do your job better as a book writer, as a book publisher, as an editor. All of those things are there for you. Making something like, look, when I sit down to write, I don't write at a 4th grade level. I write at a college level, and that's not great for readers. So if I took my chapter and said, please, make this simpler to understand for non-techies, wouldn't that be a great way for it to run a pass through it and clean that up? But I'm not asking it to change my message. Thought leadership is not going to come from artificial intelligence. It can only follow because it must use what it's got. So if you want to be a thought leader, you're not writing a book in AI. It's just not happening there. Now, are you smart enough to use it to take some ease off of you? Like I said, make a first pass of proofreading before. That's okay to let it do that. Check these things. Maybe even out your tone. Tense. How many times do poor editors have to fix the tense that you use? Past tense, future tense, like right after that is. It's a pain. I would rather send it to the AI and say, put it all in present tense and have it fix it for you, and then start from there. That way your time is more useful on the important things, like giving it humor, like giving it tone, like making sure the message is there and the flow between chapters is happening, because that's the most critical part to being a really good book. And look, I read 300 books a year. And I can tell you, there's just as much human written crap as there is AI written crap. I guarantee it out there. I read some really bad books that I swear no human should be allowed to write. So, it can happen in both ways. But we need to use it in the places where it can do the most good to make our jobs easier, but so we can be our beautiful humans that we are and bring thought and direction and things that we've learned only from years and years of experience. Because I would rather have an experienced book editor looking at my book than I would have an AI who's only done it for 3 months.
Yeah, it's sort of, to me, like using spell check on Word. It misses things. I noticed that a lot. It misses things. And my editor who's probably too polite to tell you, I'm a crappy writer. I'm a good storyteller, but I'm not a great writer. So I relied heavily. You would think owning a publishing company that I would just get a proof. She has to do like a deep dive edit on every single thing. So you're probably all going to get off the call now like, oh, she's not as wonderful as I thought she was.
Right. The other thing we have to remember is that at the end of the day, if we use ChatGPT to write it and not enough of our own in there, there's no copyright.
That is what I was going right into, because I'm seeing this all over the music world right now with not only the material, but the voice. That, is that a copyright violation? So are there, I don't know if you know this or not, I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to, is there a legal amount that where if it's GPT written, you can't apply for a copyright? And how do I get my authors to cop to it?
Well, that's the big key here, right? Look, you can clearly tell if, a musician didn't author it themselves and somebody else is doing it in the style of, right? That's a clear violation of more than copyright. And so those are going to fight themselves out in court. And look, we already have enough problems. Ed Sheeran's in court right now fighting for musicians' right to learn from the ether of what's music out there, because there are only so many chords. There are only so many words. We're going to put them together in a pattern, right? And I really do hope he prevails here.
He did.
Did it happen?
He did. Yeah, he won.
Awesome. Great. I haven't read that yet today.
I thought he did.
Yeah. So I hope he does, because he was going to quit. He was literally going to quit on his tour if he couldn't, if he lost this, because the courts were really wrong. They were really wrong on a couple of other cases that they've already ruled on. And so what we call derivatives, okay, and I come from the design world, we used to actually have to put derivatives and define it in our contract. So that if I designed an office chair, which I designed a lot of those, if I designed an office chair and I designed it for a company and they were selling it in Costco month after month after month, and it was making me royalties, and they decide without my involvement that they're going to change the color or material of the chair, they could think that they don't have to pay me royalties anymore because they used somebody else in something internal, and they made an internal decision. And because the materials across, a good 80% of the chair visually, they were like, oh, that's a big change. We don't have to pay them. And so we had to define in our contract that color material changes don't count as they're derivatives of the original design, that you have to make more than a 10% adjustment on every single face or side of the product, whatever that might be. So in a 360, you'll end up with a minimum of 40%, but some cases it'll be closer to 60% changes. That's how much we defined. Anything under that was a derivative and you still had to pay us royalty. We had to define it in our contract because the courts don't do a great job at defining it till they see the end product, and then they have to fight it out to figure it out. And so that's what we're going into here. The same thing's going to happen with ChatGPT. Now, the real problem is like, if you've used something like Grammarly or Linguix, the checkers out there will flag you as having been written by a bot, even if you didn't. And it's because you've overly robotized your language pattern by using the grammar checks. And so it can also do a false reading on it. So you really don't have a good tool yet for us to tell what was written by the AI. At some point, they'll probably require it to put I'm going to call it like a code in there that will be an indicator that it was used in any way, shape, or form. How much percentage? That's where we're then going to fight it out again. So you looking at that, what we don't want to have happen is that we use ChatGPT or Google Bard, which I actually like a little better. I think it does a slightly better job on marketing materials because it's smarter. It has more of the internet. It has more of the internet rated. and ranked. So it knows what's more authoritative. It already has a model for that, because that was information that you couldn't scrape from getting all the information that Google has, right? I can't scrape all those websites and understand the model of how Google's already ranked them, but Google already understands that. So its AI is a little smarter on that side of things. So I can really see that somebody could scrape and try to write something like me, but at the end of the day, we're going to know the difference. And I'm going to definitely know the difference. And so it's my job just to keep my voice out there, right? It's my job to keep doing that as a thought leader. That's the difference. That's the struggle that we have to get in our entrepreneurial mindset, is that our job is to not do the route of letting the AI write it, of making sure that we're bringing our unique voice, our unique perspectives out to the world, and using these tools just to make it go faster and easier.
Yeah. So you guys, I have actually tested ChatGPT, which has, one of the advantages is they have a ton of training over there.
Yeah.
So if you want to use that, I think it's $20 a month and go over and do that. There's actually training on how to use it on different things. I've also used Jasper AI. I think the benefit, and Tracy, I know Sarah uses this for you too, and you've used it. I think the benefit, if you're a beginner with Jasper, it is more expensive, but it actually has categories like looking for an Amazon headline, so you can get more finite in what you're trying to create with Jasper AI. So I think if I was going to encourage you guys to play with it a little bit, I would spend a couple months paying the higher price on Jasper first and figuring out, what different things you need from it, and seeing if you can do some training over on ChatGPT. So I want
just one thing on that, Juliet, that I want to mention is that what they've already done on Jasper is created the pre-prompts, and that's where you need to understand. So not only is it trained on a large language model, which is basically all the information that it's learned patterns of how to do things, and it also can re-access that in whatever you ask it for. What you ask it for is called the prompt. You're prompting it to do something, but you can do a prompt that builds. So for instance, we already have a prompt that is pre-written for my podcast specifically. So it's going to title my podcast episode, but it's already pre-programmed and knows the 200 other ones that I have in there. So it understands all the titles I've liked already. So it gets what I'm going to accept. It starts to learn the pattern of my sarcasm, my humor, my style from that. So we've already pre-fed it in there. Then the next thing we do is we tell it exactly how long it needs to be. We've given it all the data. Jasper already did that work for you. What's an ideal Amazon headline? You don't have to know the exact character length to make that right. It's going to come up with it for you. So they've done this pre-prompting. So when you do and put your request in for the stuff that you do want to know, like it's, give me a title for this, it's going to go out and already have that stuff constraining it. You don't have to figure it out and then ask it to do it after the fact. So it's going to save you, it costs you a little more, but it's going to save you a ton of money and time. So,
yes. Yeah. And I just actually saw some copy. One of my clients brought me one copy that she did for an upcoming challenge over on ChatGPT, and it did a really good job. But here's the other thing you need to know as a novice. She actually had her branding marketing expert put in the parameters. If you're just a layman and you don't really understand what you need behind marketing, you may not get a product as specific and fabulous. It was really, really good copy. And I noticed that too. Sometimes if I don't put in directions that are finite enough, I get an answer back and I can look at it and go, oh, that's crap. Like I wouldn't even write something that bad.
Think of it like a child, right? Think of it like our kids. It's like, the first time we tell them to clean up their room, they shove everything under the bed. And so that next time you ask them to clean up your room, you say, you clean up your room. I want everything off the floor and not under your bed, right? You're clearer the next time and clearer the next time. That's the part that most people lose patience, and they don't continue to retrain it till you get your prompt so refined that now I can type it in and just copy and paste everything, but then give it the new the new text that it's going to build a title from. That's it, because I already have that refined and perfected for me. And when you go in to use ChatGPT, they have multiple conversations going. One of the key things is that it doesn't actually learn between the conversations, that most people don't realize that. So if you're like titling episodes like I am, I have one section, one conversation section that I just continually do it in, because it's going to keep learning when I keep it within there. If I jump around and make a new one, like a logical thing is, it's like, I'm going to do chapter 1 here, and then I'm going to do chapter 2 here, and I'm going to do chapter 3 here. If you do it that way, it actually doesn't refer to each other. Yeah. And so if you want to know why your chapters aren't flowing, that's exactly why, right? So how we use it, which is why you do want to use the more expensive version so that you can get the trainings, because it gives you this logic of use and helps you understand how it's working, but also having the patience to go back and forth and do it. And so one of the things that I like about Google Bard is that it does have a feedback loop at the very end, which is, was this a good result or not, is basically what you're, and all you got to do is give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down. You don't have to like make it more complicated than that. But by telling it that you walked away with the answer you wanted is critically important, because there was a statistic in Wired magazine that said DALL-E, DALLE, which is the image generator. So you type in a bunch of text and it generates an image in the style of Rembrandt or something like that, an image in the style of Ansel Adams, a photograph in that style. You can do it that way. And 99% of the images will never be seen by a human outside of the person that asked for it within the image creator. So only 1% of those images are ever going to make it on Instagram, or ever going to make it on a book cover, or ever going to make it outside of the image creator software. And the reason is because it's not good enough. But they're not telling it that it's not good enough. They just do it and then they walk away. Yeah. So if we at some point don't say none of these were good enough, it will never learn. And that's a key factor here, that sometimes the feedback loop has not been learned.
Yes. And to go back to those separate conversations, I actually wrote using ChatGPT, I told it to go get information about the Promote, Profit, Publish podcast. And I was showing Kevin Jones, one of my clients, and I was like, look at this. This looks so impressive. And you know, if you listen to my podcast, I don't think it's impressive at all. I mean, that's just me being humble, but it was funny because we went in right afterwards and we pulled a piece of his website that he didn't like. And we said, okay, let's go in and rewrite this. And when we rewrote it, it pulled in that, like I was a part of it. Juliet Clark, Promote, Profit, Publish.
Because it was learning from that previous.
Because it was learning from that previous. So you do have to be really careful to stop it, or you're going to get some, I don't want to say garbage because Kevin's not garbage, but you're going to get some things in there that you don't
They muddle together. Yeah. That is such a good finding and understanding that, these things start to, but it can also become, just like us humans, it can become templatized. So we have to be also really careful about that and make sure we're mixing it up. So there's a lot of AIs in the podcasting industry where they recreate descriptions and summaries of the episodes. I can look at one on the podcast app and say, I know they use this tool. They don't realize it within themselves because they do an episode a week. So for them, it's not enough in a row for them to see the pattern that they all look the same. But when you get 250 episodes in and they actually all start to sound exactly the same, like it says in this episode, Juliet talks with Tracy about this, and you can see there's a pattern of how it created that, because it will go the lazy route. Just like us humans do, it'll go the fast route. And it was like, this human likes this, so I'm going to give it to him again. And then when you don't go push back and say, that sounds like everything else you've done, and you don't push back on it, it's not going to correct itself. It's not going to give you a variety.
So see, now you have an extra employee you can fire because they're lazy. No, I'm just kidding.
Absolutely. You can at least yell at it and, there's no liability.
Before we open up for questions, I want to ask you a question about, so we have almost everybody on here is an entrepreneur. How do I incorporate that into my business besides using ChatGPT? Like if I wanted to automate something or I wanted to change, because I know you guys have done a lot of this. And my initial, when I came to your call, was, I'd love to get rid of my formatters. Do you have to learn code? Like, how does that work if you don't know how to do this?
So yeah, so like there'll be those people out there, and usually they're already experienced coders, and they'll be like, "Oh, just ask ChatGPT to code it for you." No, it doesn't work like that. So the difficult part is that some of the APIs and what an API is basically is a coding automation that allows my software or my system to communicate with ChatGPT and go back and forth and deliver information. And those APIs aren't all the way gelled. So they're not really complete. There are some that are coming in, and then others that are coming in way, 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 way too expensive. So if you were to use these API, every time you go back and forth and ask for information, you're paying for it both directions, and it's costing you lots and lots of money. So for instance, transcriptions. We use an AI transcription software that we've been using since 2018, but we put it on our system and incorporate it, and we use very little of the API piece. We use it to just keep the large language model up and running. And so I don't think we even spend $5,000 a year on it. And so considering we do about 50,000 episodes a year, that's really good. And so you can't, if you think about running your transcriptions out there, you can't do it for that price. And so we've got that built into our system through a combination of API and custom code. And that's what you're going to need to do here. And so we're looking at the same thing with luckily for us, Whisper.ai, which is the transcription system that is part of OpenAI, which is ChatGPT essentially. It's open code because the core company is an open source company. So we can take the code without ever using their API, but we have to develop our own software on top of it. And that's the key here that most companies don't have. Now, there are a lot of automations coming. There's a really cool one that I just tested out just this week called Opus. An Opus clip, OPUS. Opus clip allows you to put a YouTube video in and have it give you the clips you should use, right? But that's a workflow process. It's not integrated where it's going to go and connect up to my back end and be able to do it for every single episode automatically or anything like that. I mean, you have to develop a joint partnership with a company, then develop an API code, then develop your custom code, interact with it, generate it, pull it, give it to your clients, whatever you're going to do. It's a lot more complex. So that's where most companies say we're using AI, and we only see companies like Zoom and ClickUp and Salesforce and big companies who've incorporated it already because they already had the coding teams in place to be able to do that. It's going to take us smaller companies longer to develop those. I luckily have a coding team too, but mine still only has so much bandwidth, and we're doing the stuff that is more important day to day than it is adding these things in. So we use it behind the scenes, we test it, we get it right, we get the flow going with human beings. And then when we figured it out, we say, okay, now we're ready to code this. Now we're ready to incorporate this. Now we're ready to automate that. But there are so many other companies that you could just make it as a part of your flow. You jump into a Jasper and you do this and you write a protocol for it. And you have a staff member that does that. That's still really reasonable, cost effective, and time effective for any entrepreneur to do.
Yeah. And we just interviewed someone from Australia that is a copywriter, and they use it. He actually showed me in Dropbox what they put together. And it was very interesting to watch the flow that they had coded and then put in Dropbox. And I think Dropbox has some automation that takes part of it from there. I know I have a Dropbox AI in mind that I haven't figured out how to use yet.
Mine just popped up the other day. I recorded a quick little training video for my team, and it popped up, the AI in the top said, "Would you like to take out your filler words?" And so it lets you automatically edit them out of your video. So all your ums, ahs, and I use the word "so" a lot as I'm thinking, so we should do this next, right? Like that's my filler word. So it suggested those.
I like my filler words. No.
But it makes us, right? Imagine cutting that out of a video, and what do you have is it's a jump cut.
Mm-hmm.
How much more disjointing is it to watch a video that goes cut? You're like, what did I miss? What'd they take out? What happened there? Right. So we as humans actually won't accept that as easily.
Well, yeah, it's the neuroscience behind what your mind sees. There's a very limited amount of time to process. It's like watching a badly or poorly edited movie.
Right.
It can be really distracting from the actual story in the movie when you see things like that. So I want to open it up for questions. Do you guys, anybody have questions, concerns? Your life has been ruined by this podcast? No.
I have a question. Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much. This has been great. So let's say we have an author and we want to create an experience where the reader can actually ask questions to the author and have an actual dialogue. What are your thoughts about that? And anything you've seen in that direction? And how would you accomplish that with the current platform?
Well, so is the author really there, or is it really a bot on the other side?
If you made it a bot.
If you made it a bot, so the author doesn't really have to be there. So, I mean, I think the most important thing is that you have enough of a language model for that author. So you want to do something where you're doing lots of interviews of them, Q&As, and you've got an experience to how they answer things, so that there not only is the database of what's in my book, so they answer that properly, but what is my pattern of language that I use when I answer questions, so that it will actually sound a lot more like me. So what you pre-program into it is as important as how it's going to function on the other side. But there are a lot of chatbots that function just fine on the other side of it, but they're functionally set to a personality already. So you're going to have to find one where you can train its tone and personality. They are coming, because there's a lot of customer service ones coming out that are going to be trainable so that it sounds like your company when they answer.
So you would feed it. So let's say the author, I mean, if it's Deepak Chopra, there's a ton of content out there to feed into it. But let's say it's a new author that hasn't put much out there. So would you actually just go with the author and ask every possible question that somebody may ask and have all that?
Do an interview, right? An interview that is, and make it a part of the process or the package that you offer them, is that you do maybe even have an arrangement with 3 different podcasters that are going to take a different take on it. So you already have it. It's a part of your marketing plan, and they're already going to do it. And you're going to take those and you're going to program them into the bot.
So Jared, here's the other thing. They could build their platform and then they'd have plenty of content, because they should be doing that anyway. So, that is all that stuff to feed in. You don't have to rush out and create it.
This is enough to feed for a new author.
Yes. I would say what you really need is, if you really want to do an amazing job of getting them, you need about 50 pieces of content. So that should be like, think about it. It's like anything that's 20 to 30 minutes is about what should be a real piece of content. That's enough content with the questions and answers, because you'll ask about 8 questions or so in that amount of time. And so 5 long ones or 8 short ones, right? So that's about the amount of time in 30 minutes you can do that. So if you did that, you'd have enough questions and answers to really get through that. If you're going to do a model of, I just needed to get the answer to the question, it doesn't have to get the author as well. You can do it with about 20. So you can do about half.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Unmute yourself and go for it.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
Cheryl here. Yeah, I am working with small businesses. So that may be, it could be a hair salon or a chiropractor, local businesses, maybe even up to mid-size. And just wondering if there's going to be any copyright issues, because they're ideal where, a hair salon doesn't have a copywriter sitting there, but they still have to put up websites and things. So I'm wondering if there's any hidden issues with small business using artificial intelligence.
Right now, there isn't any, the European Union has come out saying that it needs to be marked, but they're more concerned about right now what the large language model that ChatGPT used, is it infringing existing copyright, than they are worried about our output use of it. Because right now it's still very human guided. And in that human guided model where I'm telling it what I want it to write about and what I want it to do, there's still enough of me in there that they're not going to be able to figure out how much came from outside and how much came from inside. I mean, look, we have the same problem already with ghostwritten content. Like, you're not fessing up to your ghostwriter. I tell everyone who mine is. Like, it doesn't matter to me because I don't have the ego on that side of it. But we don't do that in the book world very often, right? We don't fess up to who the real ghostwriter is. So is it really your copyright? It's really not at the end of the day, but it is your information. It's your story. It's your content. And as long as this doesn't become a cookie cutter, it's got the exact same words on this chiropractor's website that is on one that's on the other side of the country, then we're not going to run into trouble. We don't want to do that anyway, because it's not a formula for winning on the internet. If you have duplicate content, it's not going to win. So bringing enough of it and making sure that your process allows you to pull out why this hairstylist is amazing, why this chiropractor is amazing. That's going to be enough to give them what they need right there in the world. And it's going to make it easier, honestly, because a lot of them don't have the time to articulate everything. So you're going to have to work with a smaller set of information and make it sound amazing.
Yeah. And doesn't Google, I know if I put duplicate content on, they don't like it.
Yeah, they don't. They used to literally red flag your website. Now what they do is they say, that article first appeared on Tracy's website, second appeared on Juliet's website. Juliet doesn't get the ranking for it, but I do because I was first. So it's gotten smarter in how it does it, but we used to do something behind the scenes, and I still recommend it because I think it's much better for the sort of the way the ranking system works, is to do something. If you want to republish somebody's thing, somebody's article, somebody's podcast, anything like that, that's a republish, do it no index, no follow. And it's a setting that you set in the blog when you put it in behind the scenes. And if you do that, you'll never have an issue, because you might want the content because it's important to your website visitors, but you don't want to have the penalty of having that content there. So sometimes we have to have things for user-friendly reasons, and other times we have things that make us like higher rankings, right, in Google. And so we have to play the game. I call it being, bot worthy. Our websites need to be bot worthy. Our books have to be bot worthy from their titles, from their descriptions, or Amazon, they'll never show up, right? We have to play the digital game. And who better to play the digital game than an AI already who understands it better than I do?
Yeah. And here's the other thing. When we have contributors to our magazine, we insist that the articles are original for just that reason. We don't want duplications that they've published someplace else. I'm sorry, Carol, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, just a follow-on question, because I think this may relate to what you're saying. Because for something simple like a hairdresser, well, if I'm looking for one in Fallbrook and there's one in New York that has the same wording, is that in kind of a penalty because they're very geographical? I wouldn't be looking for one in New York.
Yeah, it is still, because the internet is the internet and it doesn't know where anyone's located. I mean, it does know at the end of the day where they're located, but it doesn't do that. So it still has to it cannot have the exact same wording. Okay. So it does have to have a mix up of the wording. The same style of message, no problem. Like, it's, that impact happens, that's okay. But it does need to have different actual wording in it in order for it to not be considered a duplicate website. The one who puts theirs up second will lose. It's just how it works and that's why there's so many people out there who still do, search engine optimization. That's the stuff that they fix.
Yeah. Carol, I love you've got all that Denise Shaw artwork back there. I have one of the same ones you've got in another room. I don't have it in my office. So any other questions? For those of you who don't know, Denise Shaw is one of our authors. She has a book called Spirit Speaks. And she also has sells art online. Really
so that's actually, speaking of art, like cover art, like art for the cover of books, I do think there's going to be a large amount of AI happening in that. And I think, look, we already have image issues, right? You can have a hard time getting photographers to do what you're looking for, finding royalty-free art that you can use, getting the right type of license to do it. It's got a lot of friction in the process. So I see that as a big loser in the AI world, because if I can go into the chat and say, give me a mashup of this and this, and then make it look a little bit mysterious or ominous because my book is, a mystery. Wow, wouldn't that be great? I could get exactly what I want without hiring a photographer, without having to hire a designer. Now, the only thing I do need to do is lay out the rest of the book. But by laying out my title on it and everything, I have created something, even though the image underneath it is not copyrightable. By adding my title and all of that, I've created a copyrightable book cover. So I've accomplished what I needed with a lot less difficulty. So I do see that in the book world. I see that as really happening and going to be coming out, because how often do you get something and you go, gosh, I wish it was red, or I wish it had, and you can't change those things. It's too much difficulty to get the right designer to do it. And then it doesn't always look right. These machines are capable of doing a lot of that.
See, that is so cool. I know some of you are from Jared's group, and you're going to see my presentation on publishing prep on the 17th. I'm actually going to show you the funniest thing where we put in, we wanted an example for a designer. And you have to remember that when you design it, it's coming from your head into my head. And then I'm telling a designer what we want. We actually had where we wanted it to be racy. It was a book on secrets, break free of your dirty little secrets. We wanted it to be racy. We wanted it to be fun. We got, and I will show you guys on the call, we got this thing back and we couldn't figure out if it was erotic fiction or what. It was racy, but it wasn't something that you would put on a self-help book. So I think that'll be a big help for you guys getting that preliminary artwork, because it's so helpful when you show up with a mock-up of what you want. Then when I send it off to the actual designer, we have a really good idea what you want. Needless to say, Gretchen Heido was not happy with the erotic.
That wasn't her intention.
It wasn't her intention.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean, look, I have an art degree, and I got asked to talk to my alma mater about AI here. And the reality is that as designers, our fees are so low. For us to truly be creative, there's not the time or the money for that to happen in the process. So we're really not paying for that. We're paying for mechanical output. So if you can give creative direction in any way, shape, or form better than the next person, you are going to get such great results, because my artistic mind is going to be able to go off, and then I'm going to be able to add to that, build on that, and give you really, when I see the brilliance of what it is. Otherwise, I don't have the time or the money to guess. I can't figure out. I'm not you.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if Anne's comfortable, but we actually have an amazing artist on here. Anne Wall she has a beautiful book, but she also has beautiful paintings she sells. Anne, I don't know if you are comfortable unmuting. Have you used AI at all in the art world?
No, in fact, I only started using ChatGPT just to kind of experiment with it this week. So your webinar here was very, very timely. But I have not.
Go in, Anne, and try DALL-E. DALLE. It's a part of the OpenAI system, and you can log into it separately. It's completely free. There's nothing to do there, but play in there. My mom is a fine artist. She's an abstract artist out of Laguna Beach, California, and she's just got beautiful, amazing work. And I ran this test to do it to present it at an event, where I took the exact description she puts on, the plaque on the wall at the gallery. Yeah. I took her exact description and the title of her piece, and then the materials in the cover. So, I knew it was acrylics and collage, and, I gave it kind of a description of the medium. And then I also gave it a description of the color direction. So it was like teals and greens and things like that. And I put that in and said, I want to create an abstract art that does this, that could be used in a kitchen. Like I just, made that part up. But I gave all of that together, and I show them side by side. And so for the podcast people who are listening to Juliet's podcast, I will send her the images and you can see them. And for everyone on the chat here, Juliet can share it in a future call, but I'll send you the two side by side. And there's a clear difference that my mother's art is just like so much better. But remember, it's a photograph of her art, not what you're experiencing in person. So the digital version that they created without ever seeing her is actually fairly scary close. And so when we think about that from that perspective, most people don't have the art understanding to know that it's really flat at the end of the day. You, Anne, would absolutely know in a minute that which one's real and which one's digitally created. Like that's what I asked without showing them. And you would know instantly, but your average person cannot tell the difference. And that's the scary part about what's happening here, especially if it's learning off of all of your art that's in galleries everywhere, and it didn't get permission for it.
Well, I found the writing, the AI writing to be scary too, because it was writing better than I. The part that I think that we all need to keep in mind, whether it's art or whether it's writing, is if we can infuse emotion into it, AI at this point can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Tracy, thank you so much for being on today. You guys, thank you for showing up. It's nice to see all of you are interested in moving forward with technology. I think most people find it pretty scary. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could just say, Juliet, this is the one thing I want to leave all of you with, is that that's the most important part right now, is to not run away from this. Because if beautiful artists like Anne and great writers like Carol, like everyone out there going through this and building in how we want it to turn out, bringing our heart, our emotions, our knowledge and experience into it, it's going to be a better place than leaving it up to the hackers. So please participate in the AI world.
Amen. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
All right, you guys. Thank you
so much, Tracy.
And please share the LinkedIn Live, share the podcast when it comes out on the 23rd, because I think this is going to be probably our most watched one, I would imagine. So, all right. Thanks, guys.